Hello, everyone, and welcome into the Irish NFL show. I am Colin Cronin and delighted to be joined by Brian O'Leary. Brian, how are you doing?
I'm good, Colin. I feel like we're short-changed tonight, or short-handed, without our two other regular guests, our regular host in Michael, who's now already in Munich ahead of Sunday's big game, and Mark, who's got some work responsibilities this evening. But I think we're going to get into. I think it's a good fitting time, as you said to me today. We're over the halfway point in the season. Let's have a look at what we believe to be the front runners for all the awards come the end of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. Fortunately, neither Mark nor Michael needing to go on injured reserve, so they will be back in the not too distant future. And I know you yourself are heading over to Munich in just a couple of days. We are brought to you in partnership with Cassidy Travel, and we actually talked just the other night about going stateside. And if you haven't checked it out, check out Jason's piece on our website about his recent trip over. Brian, we did say that, yeah, mid-season review and kind of maybe look back at what we had thought would happen pre-season. Obviously, it's been an interesting one. I suppose, like, maybe we'll start off, and maybe one of the teams that we'll end up talking about, like, we'll talk a little bit later, maybe the surprise team. But for you, I suppose this could go either way, either surprise positive, surprise negative. Who've been maybe one of the most surprising teams for you?
Surprising teams in terms of how well they've done.
Could be, as I said, can be either how well they've done or how badly they've done.
I'll stick to the negative side before we get to the positives. Oh God, I'm torn between this one. I'll go with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I know obviously there's going to be a lot of scrutiny and ahead of the game this Sunday in Munich. But the reason why I'm going to go with them is because I picked them to go to the Super Bowl. I picked them to face the Bills. I thought having had Brady back and how close they came to winning that divisional round game last year, and how strong the defense has been over the course of the past years, I felt we'd see in a division where, with all due respect to the other teams, and we felt the Saints might be better than where they are, but we didn't think Panthers or the Falcons would be as competitive as they've been, and we certainly didn't think they'd be challenging for the division. I thought the Bucs would win this division. We were suggesting that come November the division would be wrapped up, and it'd be a case of where they fall into the order of the playoffs. But what we've seen over the course of the first 6 weeks of the season, and it's on both sides of the ball. Like we spoke about how poor the defense has played at times, but obviously the main talking point has been Brady's performance throughout the course of the first 9 weeks of the season. I know they got a win on Sunday against the Rams, but in fairness, I think for most people who watched that game, they never really play well. They played against a Rams team that punted 9 times out of 13, and they still had to struggle to get the game over the line in the last minute with a Tom Brady-esque, I suppose, last-minute driving, which we're used to seeing over the course of his career. But certainly haven't seen many of them this season. Watched the game a few weeks ago against the Ravens. They struggled for large parts, got a little bit going in the fourth quarter. It's just the inconsistencies throughout the course of the season. Obviously, there's a factor in a new head coach, Todd Bowles. I didn't think it would be smooth, but I didn't think it'd be where they're at, because I felt he would have learned from his experience, having been a coach with a team in New York and the Jets, and what comes with being a head coach in New York market. But look, it's not all lost for them. Like we are talking about halfway through the season, the division is poor, so there's it quickly could turn. It could flip around with a couple of wins, and they could be in a position to win the division. But for a team that we expected so much of, and to be certainly challenging come January to be in the position to go to the Super Bowl, it's been very poor. And I know for a few Bucs fans, I know a few that went over to the Ravens game, they're bamboozled by what they're saying. They don't know whether this team is coming or going right now.
Yeah, I think it is been very surprising, and I think for me, what was surprising in relation to the Bucks was that we didn't see them look to do more at the trade deadline, because this is, I think, widely accepted to be Tom Brady's last rodeo. Maybe he will shock the world, but I would have thought they would look to put more around him. I suppose that on the positive side of things, the team that they will play in Munich have been one of the most surprising stories of all. I know you were high on them. I thought they would win 9 games, but they may surpass even that. What was it that kind of gave you the belief that so many people lacked when it came to the Seahawks preseason.
I watched that video back, Colin, during the week, just to see your reactions again and the shock and horror in some of your faces. We'll have to watch it back together sometime. It's the Pete Carroll factor. I know they had an off season last year. They weren't even close to making the playoffs, and people felt that Pete Carroll was in a kind of a situation where people felt, is this his last year? Is he kind of looking to get out of it? The fact that Russell Wilson has been traded last March, at his age, he's had a reasonably good career. Would he want to go through the process of having to take on a young quarterback coming out of the draft? Because that was the expectation, that they wouldn't have a very good season, and they would be, high up in the draft order next year, along with the Broncos pick, which in fairness everybody felt would be further down the order because everybody expected a strong Broncos season. But it was the Pete Carroll factor for me. I felt he's the kind of coach. He doesn't necessarily remind me of Ferguson, but he has that kind of mentality, us against the world type scenario within the NFL, and when people think he's down, he comes back fighting. And all the players have bought into what he was saying throughout the course of the off-season. And what I would say as well is, and we weren't listening to it, we weren't buying it, nobody was buying it. And I know they said it was a quarterback competition between him, Gino, and Drew Lock, but everybody kept saying going into the season, we're very comfortable with the quarterback in which we have. We know what we're going to get from Geno Smith. We all thought it was madness, but it's proven to be correct. I guess sometimes you recognise what you have in-house as opposed to what people think outside. In fairness, they have some really good players. They've drafted really well this season. I think we'll probably get to it in a few minutes with potential offensive players, offensive rookies, defensive rookies, but overall, collaboratively, they've had a great draft. They've got two guys on the offensive line that are playing as if they've been there for quite some time. Great running back, great secondary, young guys there in Woolen, who's had a fantastic. Obviously, it's all come together nicely for them. I just felt that Carroll will find a way to get wins against teams when they wouldn't expect to win.
Yeah, he certainly has, and the draft class that you mentioned has been absolutely incredible. Now, I suppose, Brian, one of the stories of the last hour or so has been the fake Adam Schefter under the new verification system on Twitter, and a tweet about Josh McDaniels that he was going to be fired by the Raiders, which was obviously fake news and was debunked very quickly, but it did catch a lot of people on the hop. But because I suppose, while he's just in the door, the Raiders have been incredibly disappointing. This was a team who gave a new contract to Derek Carr, though we had discussed on the show that really it was mooted as a 3-year, but realistically it was 1 year would it get out. In terms of the Raiders, where do you feel it has really gone wrong for them this year?
There was a lot of question marks coming into the season around the secondary, their offensive line. I dismissed it. I felt, having made the playoffs last year, we would see them go back as a wild card. We had seen the Derek Carr. It's easy for people to say Derek Carr and Devontae Adams have the relationship, but they had that relationship in college, and they have a great relationship off the field, but that doesn't always mean they're going to hit the ground running. A lot of people expected that he was a plug-and-play scenario into an offense that was quite good last year with Hunter Renfrow, Waller, but Waller's had his struggles this year. He's been out injured. For quite some time, it looked like Josh Jacobs wasn't the man in which they fancied. He had little activity in the preseason games. I know players don't necessarily get a lot of action, but there was a lot of stories going around that he wasn't the preferred choice, and they were looking at whether running backs. He's obviously had a reasonably good season. He had the big game against the Texans. It's the inconsistency on offense. Derek Carr, for me, has taken a huge step back from what we saw last year. And he wasn't fantastic last year, but he was consistent in games where we didn't expect him to win, such as going into Indianapolis, finding a way to beat the Chargers in Week 17 last year. But the drop-off has been significant, and they seem to find ways. It's easy to say they find ways to lose games, but they've had 3 17-point leads this season. And teams who have a strong belief and a strong coaching staff and good coaches find ways, such as the Giants, such as the Jets right now, who haven't got a large pool of players, they find ways to continue to win. With this team, it's like as if as soon as they get up into a lead, they know they haven't got the mental resolve to win that game. And that comes from the coaches. And Josh McDaniels, who's in his second stint as a head coach, everybody felt he would learn from his time in Denver. That hasn't really materialised at all. Maybe it was too long between the Denver situation and going back into coaching. Maybe he should have stepped back in 3 or 4 years ago when that opportunity came up with the Colts. But I just think there's no mental resolve there. We saw a toughness with that team towards the back end of the season when they were playing for an interim head coach. Let's not forget who now is the special teams coordinator in Green Bay. But there's a belief there that's lacking in terms of finding ways to win games. We saw it 2 weeks ago when they went into New Orleans, got the doors blown off them. And then you could say they got the doors blown off them again last Sunday because they scored 17 points early and then didn't do anything for the rest of the game.
And just to round out this section, we do have a question from Fred in relation to perhaps another one of the kind of most disappointing aspects of the season. Aaron Rodgers and the Packers having an absolute nightmare over the past kind of month and a half. Brian, we saw them live in London. What is the biggest issue in the Bay?
Well, what we've seen over the course of the first 6 weeks, 7 weeks, 8 weeks, 9 weeks of the season is that they're adverse to change. Like the offense is not, they're trying to plug and play the same offense they played last year with Devontae Adams. And it's not working. And yes, there's been these stories around the fact that they have a different pool of wide receivers, but we see other teams with different pool of wide receivers, probably don't even have the class in which they have, and they're delivering. Rodgers is obviously completely off his game. I know what Fred is referring to. He was on Pat McAfee yesterday, and they were very precise in asking questions around the interceptions. And last Sunday's game in Detroit, I felt he held his hands up for 2 of them. I think he was more agitated by people outside of the game, expressing their views in media areas over the course of a few days, criticising them. I think he's more annoyed at that rather than the players. I didn't think he threw any of the players in particular under the bus, shall I say, but he has done over the course of a few other weeks. You could see on Sunday at times he was very disengaged with the players. I don't know how it's going to end there. There's been a few people come out this week that have said they should consider, have him step aside and put Love in and seeking to get a run with Love. I think that's only likely to happen if they are out of the playoffs. But it's a difficult one. It's hard to put your finger on because the defense hasn't played well either. And we keep referring back to the Rodgers situation, but the defense has been really inconsistent. Their run defense, which was really strong last year, has been victimised in some certain games. They beat the Patriots, but the Patriots ran all over them. We saw what Saquon did on them in London, and there's been other running backs who've gone up and down the field. And so it's a double thing. It's offense and defense. It's so disjointed, and I'm not sure where the good times are going to come from. Maybe Sunday at home. They've been on the road for the past 2 weeks as underdogs. Maybe as underdogs in Lambeau, it might be a different game on Sunday when they play the Cowboys.
Yeah, and maybe one thing that's not getting talked about, especially on the offensive side of things, is the fact that they lost 3 of their offensive coaches to the Broncos. And whilst Nathaniel Hackett is struggling as a head coach, we know the role of coordinator is very different. And obviously, with the other 2 coaches who moved across with him, that's a significant amount of change. Coupled with Adams leaving, bringing in a lot of rookies and trying to learn a whole load of new things, or even trying to roll with a similar system but completely different staff. So it will be fascinating to see over the back end of the season how they do, and we will continue to see Aaron express his views on the Pat McAfee show every Tuesday. So one to keep an eye on there.
Another point on that, Colin, you made a very good point a couple of weeks back. I can't recall where it was. I think it might have been in response to a number of people engaging over the poor performance of the Packers. And you said that they need to go back to basics and start focusing on trying to leaning on the run game. Look, that hasn't materialised at all. Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon are really strong running backs. I know they've had their injuries. We saw again Aaron Jones on Sunday, but they're not using them at the level we even saw last year in a strong side going for the playoffs and being number 1 seed. There was a balanced offense last year. We're not seeing that at all.
Brian, I think I might know who you might discuss on this, but your comeback player of the year thus far.
You really want to ask that one, Colin? Is that not a given? I said in our season preview show when I was asked who the comeback player of the year would be, I said it will be Saquon Barkley. He looks like a completely different animal this year to what we've seen over the past few years. It's like the build-up of frustration over 2 or 3 years with all the injuries in which he's had. have finally come to a stage where he's going to prove it. And it's very much a prove it year. It still is a prove it year, whether he'll be there next year. They're in a situation now next year where they'll have to, come the off-season, where they'll have to decide if he's the long-term answer. I think he's clearly proven already he is the long-term answer, but obviously financially it'll have to make sense. I suggested he would have 1,500 yards rushing, 15 to 16 touchdowns this year, 90 odd receptions. He's at 900 yards rushing after 8 weeks of the season. I think we're well on course to beat his original rookie record. Look, everything goes through Saquon with the team. I know Daniel Jones has stepped up and had a really strong season, but without a strong running game, this wouldn't materialise in terms of how well the offense has done, despite the lack of wide receiver, in terms of the wide receivers available to the team, in terms of the level and expectation you'd want from players, a core of 3 or 4 wide receivers. Like you'd argue it could be Derrick Henry coming back off an injury, but is that a surprise? Geno Smith. But for a player who's missed large parts of the last 2 years with serious injuries, to be playing at the level he's playing against good teams as well in the league that they've beaten, the Ravens, the Packers at times. Obviously, Packers have had their problems. To go into Tennessee, who were the 1 seed last year, score touchdowns, score 2-point conversions. There's so many storylines for the season already for Saquon, so I can't see how anybody would be opposed to that. I'm sure there is, and I'm sure you might have another alternative, but for me, it has to be Saquon.
I think Saquon, to me it's between Saquon and Geno. I think probably the way in which the back end of the season plays out will dictate ultimately who wins it. But nobody thought, I think when the trade happened, everybody expected Drew Lock to be the Seahawks starting QB. And it was funny because obviously a lot of Lock fans in Denver, and when the competition seemed to edge towards Geno, there was a lot of talk that Pete was the exact same as Vic Fangio, and it wasn't a real competition, and he was going with the safe pair of hands, and he would come to regret it. Well, he certainly has not, because Geno might not win comeback player of the year because he could end up winning the MVP race. Who knows what might happen there. I suppose then, Brian, if we move on to the rookie class, and been some young players making big names for themselves, in terms of your standout on offensive rookie.
I've seen, I do agree with you some, because I've gone through a number of ones and I read through ones, and which one keeps popping up for me, and it's Kenneth Walker in Seattle. But strangely enough, he's only really started to adjust to the league and do so much in the past 4 games. Like, he had the breakout game in LA, he had scored 2 touchdowns against Arizona the week before that. But I suppose that is a caveat to the fact that they lost their main running back in Penny for a season-ending injury. So he was kind of in and out of the team at that stage. But what we've seen over the course of the past few weeks is the explosiveness. He scored 2 touchdowns last Sunday. He scored a touchdown against the Giants, 2 against the Chargers, 2 against Arizona in the previous game. Like, he's so elusive, and it's very difficult to get down. He just, we're talking about teams that have a balanced offense with players like Metcalf, Lockett, to have a running back come into the league and straight away, within reason, hit the ground running. Pardon the pun, as a running back, but for me, he's a standout player. And it's strange because I can find myself, I won't, but I find it difficult not to pick the defensive rookie of the year on the same team. But I don't want to put it all in the eggs in one basket with Seattle, because it could come crashing down very quickly. But for me, he's been a standout player, and he's so explosive and so enjoyable to watch.
So you're going, you would go with Tariq Woolen then as your defensive rookie of the year. Is that based on where he was taken in the draft?
Yeah, fifth round pick, and you look at his numbers against Sauce Gardner and what he's done so far. What I would say going into the season, just Sauce Gardner was going into a defense that was already stacked, and a lot was expected of that defense. We spoke about in the preseason that we didn't feel this Jets team was too far away from being a really strong team if they could get it together offensively. Well, they haven't had to get it together offensively for large parts because the defense has been so strong. He's slotted in. Obviously, he's a standout player, but for a team going into the season to have so many question marks, and if an aging cornerback playing on one side, and then he's no longer there because you've got 2 rookies in Kobe Bryant and Woolen. Obviously, Woolen is a little bit ahead of Kobe Bryant because Kobe Bryant has had his flaws already this season. For me, in terms of, you could see it early on in the season, interceptions, getting in. Whether he's playing man on man or whether he's playing strong against the player. He can adapt to every situation. He's been again another standout player for the Seahawks.
Yeah, I can see that. Although for me, what I think has been so impressive about Sauce is the fact that there were so many expectations, and he is in a market where every single thing you do gets analyzed. Nothing flies under the radar, and he has been outstanding. He has been a real leader for them. He has found a way to annoy opposing players, whether it's the cheesehead or whether it is opposing fans losing their minds and claiming DPI. But I think a lot of the time, there's a lot of wrestling that goes on between receivers and cornerbacks, and referees generally aren't shy to throw a flag when it's warranted or otherwise. So I think Sauce has been exceptional. And I think if the Jets are to have any chance to continue with the exceptional run that they're on and make the playoffs and end the longest drought in the NFL currently, Sauce will be a key part of that. And in for the veterans, Brian, in terms of the offensive and defensive player of the year, who would get your nod at the midway point?
Defensive player of the year. God, it's probably getting boring, but how can you get away from Mickey Parsons? He's fantastic. And I mean, his numbers aren't really stacking up against other players in the league. He's been held off in terms of getting sacks and quarterbacks, but it's his second year in the league. He had 18 sacks in 19 games. I think it was going into that Giants game in week 4. I mean, the numbers alone are very impressive. But we've seen players over the course of the years where they have a really strong first season. I'm not necessarily saying the teams figured them out in terms of scheming against them, or they double team him on the line. Teams have done that, and he's still finding ways to get to the quarterback. He can play on the edge. He can play linebacker. He can play, interior on the line. He is just a standout player. And every team who goes up against the Cowboys, the first thing they're going to think about is how do we go and play against this player and somehow find a way to stop him. It's very difficult. Cowboys defense has been really strong this year. At the start of the season, when Dak went out and everybody said this is already a bad situation, they may not win the games. They won the games, and I know Cooper Rush was playing steady offensive football, methodical drives, but a large part of it was down to the fact that they had a really strong defense. So for me, he's a standout player. I'm struggling on the offensive side. I'll let you go on that one now for the time being, and I'll come back. Where are you going with that one offensively? Josh Allen, it's obvious from Jalen Hurts that I'm sure you have a lot of love for the Eagles and the Philly people.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose just to round out the defensive part, I think Parsons and Bosa are probably the standouts. One who I'm very interested to see can he continue it is Matthew Judon. He had a great start to last year, but he really tailed off towards the end. He has had an exceptional first half of the season this year, 11 and a half sacks. It's ridiculous. And the Patriots offense has taken a step back this year. Obviously, without Josh McDaniels, there's been issues with Mac Jones in terms of injuries, and obviously Zappi coming in and that. But Judon has been the shining light for them. I am interested to see if he can keep that up. I mean, I suppose in terms of the offensive player for me, usually the MVP race is always kind of between the quarterbacks. So I'll go for an offensive player. My pick currently will be Tyreek Hill. Came out of Kansas, where obviously had an exceptional time there. A lot of people said, oh, he's leaving Andy Reid, he's leaving Patrick Mahomes. He's not going to be the same player that he once was. Tua won't be able to throw it deep, etc., etc. Tyreek Hill has over 1,000 yards, and Miami looked like one of the most electrifying offenses in the league. So to me, Tyreek gets the nod for Offensive Player of the Year.
I would have to say Jalen Hurts, because I could say Josh Allen, but the reality is there was so much expected of him, and I have been very critical of Hurts and didn't believe he was at the caliber in which we've seen this year. And I read a lot of reports in the offseason. I spoke to Mark Hogan when we were on our way to London. He was saying his brother's an Eagles fan, and throughout the course of the offseason, there was this continuing story about how he was working so hard to get his throwing motion corrected. It wasn't all about being a run quarterback, and that's kind of reflective of the last couple of games. Like, they're winning games, and everybody just assumes that he's running for 60, 70 yards, and it's the dual threat, and he's running in touchdowns. He hasn't scored over the course of the past weeks, and he hasn't run much. I mean, the game last week, and people might turn around and challenge it and say, well, they're only playing against the Texans. But he only ran for 24 yards in that game. The week prior to that, the previous game they played, similar scenario. Like, they're winning games now with him as a quarterback, not in a position where he has to be continuously running with the ball. It's a great threat, and I'm sure we'll see more of it as coming over the course of the next few weeks when they play against more difficult teams, when they play against the likes of the Cowboys again, another potential difficult opposition, and that will have to be used in the offensive bag of tricks. But they are playing against teams that are allowing them the opportunity for him to run. He's not taking it. He's still delivering the great throws. So he surprised me. Nobody can be surprised by how well Josh Allen has played. So for me, I would lean Jalen Hurts for offensive player of the year.
Yeah, and the fact that he's throwing into the middle of the field, which was the biggest knock on him, coming into the season, and he has shown he can do that and do that repeatedly, and something that much more experienced QBs are shying away from. Aaron Rodgers isn't throwing into the middle of the field this year nearly as much. So I suppose then, Brian, to kind of round up this section before we look ahead to tomorrow night's game, in terms of at the halfway point, who is your MVP?
Well, I purposely went with Hurts for offensive player because it has to be Josh Allen. Like, he played injured towards the back end of the game last weekend. He still runs in 2 touchdowns in the game. He's done so much for the Bills this season already, and like, I think back to the first game of the season against the Super Bowl champions, and they blew them out. They played against other strong teams. They've blown them out. They came back. It's not even about the explosive of winning games comfortably. It's the games where they're not, and we've always had this knock on them. A repeated stat last year was they keep winning games by 10 plus points. What's going to happen when they play against teams and tough games? And I know they lost down in Miami, but they had a lot of injuries. But the game that stands out for me is they're down by 17 points in Baltimore. And I know Baltimore have had their difficulties in terms of maintaining leads, but to come back in the manner in which they did win late on shows that there's a mental toughness within, not just with him, with the team, but he's a standout player. And obviously there's a lot of conversation around whether he will play this weekend, because it seems to be he has this elbow injury which could be concerning. Potentially won't play this week, and they'll rest him up for the following week. But I mean, he's a standout player. Bills, again, I'll give you another example. That game in which he went into Kansas City, we spoke how important that game was to be potentially as a number 1 seed come January. Similar scenario late in the game where we've seen Mahomes do it in the past, and we saw Mahomes do it on Sunday Night Football. He drives him down the field, throws the dart to Dawson Knox. They win the game. Just another example of him not just being in a position to blow teams out, but to win difficult games and have those drives. So for me, he's the standout candidate for MVP.
If we'd recorded, if this was 2 weeks ago, I think he would have been for me too. But he's been a little bit too careless with the football over the past couple of weeks, and I am interested. I do recognize he is the Bills' offense, and I think that's an issue for the Bills in many respects, because everything is on him. And you have to give kudos to him as well in terms of, what he has done, obviously, with Dable moving on, and they haven't really missed a beat. I am interested to see, how this injury impacts upon him, and we'll probably get a little bit more into that tomorrow night when we might be clearer. I know at the moment they're saying he's day to day, but an injury like that, you're never really sure. I think it will. I think this will very likely come down to Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, and Patrick Mahomes. I think depending on how many games the Eagles end up winning, Hurts will have to be in there if they win, 15 games. He would have to be in that conversation. To me, Patrick Mahomes is probably just ahead of the others at the moment, because he continues to make the extraordinary look ordinary, and we're so used to it now at this point that it doesn't come as a surprise. Like when Mahomes does something ridiculous, it's like, oh yeah, well that's what Patrick does. We expect and we demand almost that he goes above and beyond at every single opportunity. So the fact that he lost Tyreek Hill and people wondered would he without that deep threat, the fact that defenses were playing the two high safeties, the shell, but he has found a way to do it, and that's as well with the Chiefs running game struggling. Now, you could make the argument that Andy Reid tends to get away from the running game too quickly, and there might be validity to that. It it would be, but like Mahomes threw almost 70 pass attempts on Sunday. Like, that again, like that is just a ridiculous stat. And to me, if the Chiefs end up being the number one seed in the AFC, given the strength of schedule that they had to face, obviously being the AFC West winners again last year, I think it would be very difficult to dissuade me from Patrick Mahomes being the MVP. There is a comment saying that elite QB is not having a great year. We do know offensive scoring is down. It could be a surprise. I would love the league to go with a different MVP, but we know that it is so rare for the league to look outside. They should, absolutely, they should. But they so rarely do that. And Brian, just very quickly then before we move on, I imagine I probably know your answer to this one. The head coach of the year at this point?
Brian Dable, absolutely. Torn between that and Pete Carroll, to be honest. Colin, I did go back and forth on this before when I was looking through the list in which we discussed and agreed for the show this evening. But I would still suggest, was people thought that the Seahawks were going to have an average season or maybe even a poorer season, and people, in terms of after the aftermath of the Russell trade, they still had good players in offense. The Giants don't have a lot of good players in offense, with all due respect to who's out there right now. And like I said to a Giants fan before the season, I was very confident we'd win a lot more games. I said it to you when we did the show out in Ballymount. I put a lot of that down to scheduling as well, but we've seen coaches come and go with the Giants, and they just don't know how to coach, with all due respect to those people who are involved. Where Brian Dable, we've seen it in London firsthand. He finds ways at the right time in games. And a lot of that's down to the fact that when he came in, everybody felt he's coming from Buffalo. He's the offense coordinator. He's the one that people said built up Josh Allen. Josh Allen came into the league his first year. He was he had a difficult time in terms of his passing ability, and he corrected that. And everybody felt he would do the same for Daniel Jones. I don't necessarily think he's doing the same for Daniel Jones in terms of they're going down the same path, because to me they're still very different type of players. Jones doesn't have the skill set which Josh Allen has, but he has worked with the skill set which he has done and been very productive and got the best out of him. But it's more so that he brought in very significant people in terms of the coaching. He brought in Mike Kafka, who was the quarterback coach in Kansas City. There was a lot of talk that the reason why Chiefs wanted Bieniemy to get a job was so they could promote him to be the offense coordinator. We've seen how aggressive he can be at times, and the play calling that suits the offense and the players that he has around him. And Wink Martindale, who was let go by the Baltimore Ravens to bring him in, was a masterful decision as well. He's allowing them to coach. He said from day one, I'm not going to call the plays, despite the fact that he has all that experience. I'm going to coach. And we've seen that with, you've seen it firsthand with the Broncos, that if, we've had a conversation, should Hackett have had an offensive coordinator that's calling the plays and not him, and he do the coaching. Brian Dable has, and he continuously says the same thing every week. It's not just me, it's the coaching staff. I put a very good team around me. How can you not be impressed with what he's done? They're 6-2, and whatever about how the course of the next season, the remainder of the season goes, realistically, if you look at where the league is at the moment, for the Giants to be a wildcard team, I would imagine they only need to win 3 more games. That maybe I'm I'm being a bit. So maybe I'm not factoring in other scenarios and other teams and what they have to play. But if you look at the amount of games that are going up, NFC teams are going to knock each other off. Right now, they have a 2-game lead on the seventh seed. I think 3 wins will be enough to get them a wild card. They play the Texans this weekend. They play the Lions. There is a scenario there, and I know the NFL every week is different, but there is a scenario where they could be 8-2 in 2 weeks before they go to Dallas on Thanksgiving. Like that's hugely impressive. Even if they split the next 2 games to be 7-3, going into a Thanksgiving game when nobody gave them a hope this season, it's highly impressive. And you got to compliment the GM as well. They had the relationship in Buffalo. But I'm probably going on too much about the love of my team. But
it's coming across. I think it will be interesting to see. I think at this point, certainly Dable is up there. Nick Sirianni again has to be up there second season to have the team unbeaten. And to make the adjustments that he did last year, obviously, where he handed over play calling duties. To me, it's what the other probably standout candidate is, and it's a comment that rightly came in there, Robert Saleh. If the Jets were to make the playoffs, I think that would be a phenomenal job given the injuries that they have suffered, the fact that they've had to change the quarterbacks, but to lose, the guys on the O-line, to lose one of the most exciting running backs, etc., etc. For this one, I really think that the second half of the season will be really, really important in terms of telling us who it is, because you can have, and we have seen it, teams have good kind of opening halves to the season, and then it can all fall apart. We remember the 11-0 Steelers team from just a few years ago, who went 11 games unbeaten, but it was very obvious that they weren't the real deal, as ended up proving to be the case in the playoffs. Brian, are there any other observations on the season thus far, as we are about to start talking about Week 10?
Well, we've spoken about the season now. We've had offenses start the season strong and defenses catch up, but I think it kind of was flipped on its head this year. The offenses haven't been at the level we've seen, the amount of low-scoring games. And I think you put a stat out there a couple of weeks ago where it shows that if you're comparing last season at that stage of the season in terms of points against this season, it's way down. But it doesn't necessarily mean this season hasn't been exciting. It's been a standout season. There's some teams that are disappointing. We're going to disappointments. There's some coaches that have disappointed me. And I think I've aired my views at times on the show, but Brandon Staley, despite the fact that the Chargers are in a position that they're in, that has disappointed me. I would say Sean McVay has disappointed me, because Michael made a good point the other day. He seems to be continuing to talk about wanting to be doing something else as opposed to coaching. He's still a very young man. I was just winning a Super Bowl. That's surprising. You could say the Rams have been very surprising. I mean, we spoke in last February in LA, that the Rams really needed to win the Super Bowl because they had invested so much, from the owner to the new stadium, to trades, to giving up so much draft capital to get the Super Bowl won. And then I think you said 3 or 4 years' time, this is all going to come crashing down, but they'll have their Lombardis and they'll look back at the good times. Well, it's come crashing down very quickly, by the looks of it. To see a Super Bowl team, we talked about the Bengals maybe having a hangover. They've rebounded reasonably well to a difficult start to season, but the Rams don't look like. And I know we'll get into it tomorrow night on the show, but Matthew Stafford has been confirmed this evening, has been in concussion protocol, may not play against the Cardinals. They are another team that we haven't really touched on there that have been a huge disappointment.
Indeed, but one of the teams that have been a very pleasant surprise, and one of the most exciting teams to watch in a season, we've talked about offensive play being down, but one of the teams that in fairness have been interesting on offense, doing really interesting things, and we are going to discuss them now with our good friend. Delighted to welcome back. He's an award-winning sports writer. He works at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. D. Orlando Ledbetter, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Really appreciate it.
D. Orlando, we always love having you on the show, and I suppose it's interesting because a lot of people were down on this Falcons team before the season began and wondered, what was it going to be? The change with Matt Ryan moving on, Marcus Mariota coming in, nobody knew. But they have been, whilst the results maybe haven't always gone their way, Arthur Smith has done a heck of a job with the resources that he has at his disposal, right?
Yes, he has 4-5 with a lot of 9 new starters on the defensive side of the ball, a new quarterback, a new style of play. Everything's not perfect, but they've gotten a lot of things right here early. Near the midway point in this season.
The Orlando, Marcus Mariota was brought in the offseason. They made a run at Deshaun Watson, and we know how that played out. And then he was brought in soon after within the free agency period. People felt he was like, a holding quarterback for potentially a draft pick. Obviously, Desmond Ridder has got injured and he's out for the season. Do you see the long-term plan for Ridder to be stepping in at some stage? Not necessarily this season, but if Mariota continues to play, I know he's had some up and down games, but if the team wins the division, for example, because it is a poor division this year, do you still think there's a plan to move away from Mariota next season?
I don't know how soon it is. He's got a 2-year contract that screams of a 1-year deal. That they could easily get out of the 2-year, second year of the contract. But right now, he's their guy. He's got him in the middle of the playoff race. And until that changes, he's going to probably be in good stead with the current administration. Desmond Ridder, they do want to develop him as a quarterback of the future, but they're doing it in practice, not in the games. We've seen some of the young quarterbacks go in and struggle already. Kenny Pickett in Pittsburgh, Malik Willis on Sunday night against the Chiefs there. There's no chance he was going to drive that team down in overtime for a win. They are being cautious and developing the quarterback, and he should be learning a lot under Marcus Mariota. And then maybe when it's time for him to take over, they can come in and run the full offense and throw the ball deep down the field a little bit better than Marcus is doing. Marcus is doing great underneath, but he's having trouble getting the ball connected with his receivers on the deep balls.
And in terms of those receivers, Orlando, the Falcons have like 2 outstanding young talents, Drake London, Kyle Pitts. We've seen flashes from both of those guys. Do you think, I suppose building on the last question, can Mariota and the team look to get them more involved in the second half of the season, especially for London, who's a rookie and is obviously still learning his trade? And look, we know for rookie tight ends, it takes time to settle in. Or are they going to continue to lean heavily on the run game?
Yeah, the run game's elite, so they're gonna continue to lean on that. It's 4th in the league right now. They've been able to run it with 4 different running backs, whether Patterson's there or not. And so you got to keep that. But you got to throw off of it a little bit better than what you've been doing. We knew that who Marcus Mariota was. We weren't expecting him to come in and throw for 300 yards every Sunday. But when you got a guy open deep like they did against the Chargers, you got to be able to hit that pass. People are going to come up to the line of scrimmage to stop the run, and you have to be able to make them pay. So he doesn't have to do a lot more, but just a little bit more, and getting the ball to Pitts and Drake London, and getting it down the field with a little bit more accuracy. So that's where they're at with the passing game and mixing in this offense. They've done a good job of putting in the base runs, but yeah, you got to add a little bit more passing to it so you can make the teams pay when they try to put 8 players in the box to stop your run.
Orlando, you spend a lot of time around the players, and I'm just interested to hear your thoughts on the mental resolve of this team, because in week 1, for example, they were quite some distance ahead of the New Orleans Saints. They allowed the Saints to come back. They nearly blew the Panthers game at home 10 days ago. It looked like it was all over with 20 seconds to go. And then last Sunday against the Chargers, me and Colin discussed, essentially they found ways. We've said in the past the Falcons find ways to lose games. Well, they did it. They went back to some old traits on Sunday, losing a game they probably should have won. There's a quick turnaround going into tomorrow night's game. You know, from what you've seen this week, is the burden of losing on Sunday still there, or is it very much moving on to this game?
Yeah, I was just in the locker room about an hour ago, and that was one of my questions to the veterans. I don't ask the young guys about it because they don't know. But Cordarrelle Patterson said that, he liked the way the guys got back to work, how they, were really attentive and paying attention to the game plan. And he felt that they're ready to go up to Carolina and play a good game. And so did Grady Jarrett. He said, with him being the captain, he's that's part of his job is to, maintain the pulse of the team. And he feels that, they're ready to move forward and kind of establish some superiority over the Panthers and not let them hang around like they did in the last game, So the mental state and the psyche of the team appears to be in pretty good shape according to the veterans.
And the Orlando, I'm wondering in terms of what the feeling is on the ground there and amongst the fan base with the Calvin Ridley trade. Now, I needed more fingers than I have to try to work out all the permutations and combinations about what the Falcons will get if he's on the roster, if he plays, and that sort of stuff. But what is the feeling amongst the Falcons that they essentially got a good return given the circumstances of the trade?
Yes, the fans feel that way. And Scott Pioli, the former assistant general manager, was here when they drafted Ridley, believes that they got a good haul. Fourth round conditional pick that could accelerate into the second round if he re-signs with Jacksonville. So first he's got to get off the suspension list and then hopefully get back on the field and then do enough on the field to where Jacksonville signs into a long-term contract, and then the Falcons would have a second-round pick coming their way in 2024. So for a guy that they were going to move on from anyway, it just was too much water under the bridge. He needed a new start. They needed a new start. And if you can get a fifth and a second-round pick for him, that's pretty good bounty for a former first-round pick that hasn't played and pretty much hasn't played in the last 2 years.
To Orlando, every head coach, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator makes statements before the season starts. Dean Pease, the defensive coordinator, said everybody's going to be pleasantly surprised by how well this defense is going to play this season. It's been mixed, shall we say, over the first 9 weeks of the season. There's one player in particular that I always keep an eye out, Lorenzo Carter. He played for the Giants. He's from the neck of the woods, as they say. What have you made of his performances and the defense overall this season?
Yeah, Lorenzo has made some plays, made a couple big splash plays too. Block punt, the interception return, against the Panthers where he went up and got the ball. And you always want to see more sacks and more quarterback hits. But he's a solid pro for the Falcons out of Norcross High here and then the University of Georgia. But they need more production, not only from Lorenzo, but from the other defensive ends also.
And the Orlando, we talked, I suppose, about the Falcons being a little bit of a surprise package to a lot of people. We've just reached kind of the midway point of the season. What would success look like for the Falcons? Is it like remaining competitive? Is it a winning season? Is it making the playoffs? I'm sure Arthur Smith wants to make the playoffs, but for the fans, what would they consider a successful season?
Yeah, it's already they were only predicted to win 4 games, so if they get one more, they're there. Now they made it through the tough part of their schedule where they played all the tough teams up front. Now they have 8 games left. 4 or 5? 8 games left, and only 2 against teams with winning records. So what he's going to do here is, hey, can you beat the the 2-7 teams, the Panthers? Can you beat the Cardinals? Can you beat the Bears? The two teams with the winning records, or the Ravens and Washington. I think Washington was 4-4 going into last week. So if they lose those two and win the other six, that's gonna put you at 10-7, and you're gonna probably win the division, or you can probably have to win the division because the wild card numbers are gonna be too high in the NFC East. And that would be like a romping success through the park. The big success is that, hey, they're building the foundation of a football team, and maybe they do have to go out and get a quarterback, but you can see that Drake London can play. You can see that they can block. You got running backs who can run. You need defenders that are going to stop people. Right now, they are opportunistic on defense. They give up a lot of yards, but they've got +1 in the turnover margin, which is 13th in the league. So they're gonna take the ball away from you and give up the yards and rally and hit and cut down the yak yards there while you're trying to build out that defense. So the realistic fans that know Rome wasn't built in a day will see some progress this year, and the win-loss record right now has to exceed everybody's expectations.
Dear Orlando, the schedule always throws up some unusual scenarios, such as both teams coming off the buys and playing each other, like when the Patriots play the Jets in 2 weeks' time. It's 2 weeks, I guess, but it won't even be 2 weeks tomorrow when the Panthers face up against the Falcons. What's your expectation for this game? Bearing in mind it's so soon since they last played each other, the manner in which how that game played out with what looked like a Panthers win at the end, only for them to have the celebration mistake. They miss field goals in overtime to win. The Falcons get it over the line. Are we going to see a back and forth type of game like that tomorrow night, or do you think it'll be a little bit more one-sided towards the Falcons?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a tough game again. They Carolina and the Falcons play each other tough no matter what. If it's 2 weeks or 1 week, they're two teams that are close together. Just right up the road a little bit, and PJ Walker had a good enough game last time that they're going to run him back out there. And certainly the Carolina Panthers have a stout defensive front to make things tough for this Falcons offense. With Shaq Thompson and Derek Brown and Brian Burns, they have some good players over there. So they'll come ready to play. I'm fully expecting another close one here. And, maybe the Falcons will execute a little bit better down the stretch and put them away, but they haven't put too many teams away. They did put the 49ers away. That's the only win they have that wasn't a one-score game. So at some point, you got to get consistency, and you got to have a standard of play that you don't deviate from, throughout the game. Like the defense came out with 2 3-and-outs and then gave up 6 straight third down conversions. That's too much. You can't do that. So the team has to get better consistently on both sides of the ball. Score in the red zone, convert on third downs, complete your long passes. Basic football things if you want to really be a real playoff contender.
Dear Orlando, I hope you realize that both the Falcons and you got some comments that people enjoy watching the Falcons, and people saying Dear Orlando is the main man. So you have a fan base here in Ireland. Hopefully we can get you over here someday. And I always enjoy. Dear Orlando has one of the best NFL podcasts out there. The Bowtie Chronicles is always fantastic. And Dear Orlando, just for viewers and for listeners on this side of the Atlantic who want to hear more of your stuff, where can they find you?
Yeah, well, my Twitter is at Dear Orlando AJC, and our website is ajc.com. The podcast is on Apple and Spotify, and you can get it in your other places where you get your podcasts. But that's the best way to keep up with our Falcons coverage, and we certainly appreciate our fans across the pond in Ireland there.
Well, Dear Orlando, we were fortunate to get the opportunity to meet you last year at the Super Bowl in California. Hopefully, maybe we'll see you again in Arizona, and hopefully the Falcons will have a successful second half of the season. We want to thank you for taking the time to join us. We always really appreciate it, and it's always great to chat to you.
Well, thank you all for having me on the Irish NFL show, and hopefully we will see each other in Arizona this year for the Super Bowl.
Thanks to Orlando.
Thanks to Orlando. Take care.
All righty.
Oh, I always enjoy talking to D Orlando, and definitely check out if you're a Falcons fan, check out or interested in the Falcons, do check out the Bowtie Chronicles. He always has great guests on there. Brian, in terms...
Just quickly, sorry, kind of reading between the lines, he's basically said the Falcons are going to win the division, yeah?
I think he feels that it's in play for them, and why not? Who knows with the way the Bucs are playing, the way the Saints are playing, who knows what might happen in terms of the game tomorrow night, Brian? What are your thoughts?
Well, it's an unusual one, in the sense of you've got a team coming off a very difficult defeat 4 days ago. Two teams coming off difficult defeats in different ways, really. You've got the Falcons who lose a tough one. You know what I mean? You made a very funny point on Monday evening about the whole craziness of the end of the game where Eckler fumbles and the Falcons pick it up and run it back, and then they refumble it, and they didn't seem to be demoralised by the fact how the play unfolded, which I found unusual. But it was a difficult loss all the same. You got a last second field goal. It's always a difficult loss. And then you got a Panthers team that were 35-0 down at halftime, completely blown out. A lot of people felt the game would close. I know you picked them. People felt we'd see a much tougher performance from the Panthers, but it wasn't there. It was non-existent. The quarterback, PJ Walker, gets removed at halftime. He's going to start tomorrow, which again is probably an unusual move. I think Sam Darnold might be back in sooner than we think. You know, he's due to come off the IR list. I think he already has, in fact, so I think he could play at some stage in the coming weeks. And they said, I was interested to hear the comments of Wilkes, the interim head coach. He said that we're sticking with PJ Walker for two reasons. One, he had a really successful game only 10 days ago against the Falcons, so he knows what to expect. And there's not enough turnaround time to consider moving away from him. Let's be fair, if Baker Mayfield doesn't know the offense at this stage, haven't been there for quite some time, I think that kind of signifies what they really think of Baker Mayfield, which is quite damning, because it's difficult to see where he's going to end up next season. For me, the Falcons, I think the Falcons are going to win this game. I was really impressed with Cordell Patterson coming back. Like, he really is a hidden gem. We spoke about him in the offseason, that they do have some good players on offense with London and Pitts, and he complements them really well. He had 2 touchdowns last week. He ran another one in, which was pulled back on a dubious hold. For me, he's a difference maker in this game. Having come back last week, played really well against the Chargers, albeit losing the game. I don't think it'll be as close this time. I think the Falcons offense will put up a reasonably good amount of points on this Panthers defense, and who can play well in their day and has played well at home. But I think the Falcons, we saw a bit of a turn from the Panthers having got Wilkes in. They beat the Bucs and they played tough in LA, but they've still come back to what we expected, which is a team that don't have a lot of good players. The Falcons, they're in the mix. I think they'll find a way to win this game.
Yeah, I suppose the interesting thing is the QB situations for both of these teams in many ways, because the Falcons, am I right? The Falcons could have had the opportunity to take Justin Fields last year.
They picked 4th in that draft and they took Kyle Pitts. Yeah, and then the Panthers picked 8th in that draft and they took JC Horn.
Yeah, so both of these teams could have had that opportunity for the Falcons to have maybe sat him behind Matt Ryan for a year, let him develop, and obviously I would be surprised if any of the QBs who are on the Panthers roster right now are there next year. Mayfield's out of contract, Darnold's out of contract, and I believe PJ Walker. Maybe they bring PJ back as a backup. And I'd love to. It would be great to see PJ have success, obviously given the XFL. But when you get pulled at halftime, it's not a ringing endorsement of where they want you to be. Michael is going for the upset. He is saying that the Panthers will win. I don't know if you have heard from Mark in terms of Mark's thoughts.
Mark's selection is the Falcons. Sorry, just to touch on, you're talking about PJ Walker and difficult performance last week. We both alluded to it there. 3 for 10, 9 yards, 2 interceptions. From a week in which he puts up huge numbers and a 67-yard explosive touchdown at the end to that performance last week. It's hit and miss.
Roller
coaster. Yeah.
We're only a few weeks on. What was it? Obviously, that throw is to DJ Moore is the one that stands out. And given what we saw last weekend with players taking out their helmets, that there's no way that should have been a penalty. But I would say that a few weeks ago they had a game where they didn't allow PJ Walker to throw. Basically beyond the line of scrimmage. He had 1 yard beyond the line of scrimmage was the furthest throw downfield. So I don't just put it on the quarterbacks either. I think the offensive play calling leaves a lot to be desired there. I did think the Panthers, I thought maybe they were getting something going under Wilkes, and I thought their run defense had been really solid. But it all fell apart last weekend. Brian Burns is the standout there. So if they really did get the offer of 2 1s and a 2 for him, it is incredible that they turned that offer down, as talented as he is. I think probably last week's loss put a bit of the kibosh on the Panthers, slim chances of making a run. So to me, the Falcons should go on to win this. I don't think it'll be. I think it'll still be tight because I do think this is something of a rivalry game. I think the Panthers will want to make a bit of a statement given what happened at the weekend, but I think the Falcons, as D'Orlando pointed out, 4th best rushing attack in the league, and when they do want to throw it, the weapons they have are quite exceptional. So to me, I'm going to say that the Falcons will get the win. Do you want to say a couple of things?
Sorry. You have more on Marcus Mariota going into this game, because we have spoke on the show when we're reviewing on the Monday on the fact that they've limited his throws in games in terms of how many times they give him the opportunity to throw. We saw that when they went into Cincinnati. We kind of saw it last week to a certain extent. His numbers were down. He only had 129 yards last week, 12 of 23. The one game where you could call he's had the most explosive game was in fact the game against the Panthers. He was 20 for 28, 253 yards and 3 touchdowns. So, there is a kind of mindset in the league, with fans that he's a very run-oriented quarterback, and he just complements the team with the strong running game which they do have. But when he isn't in position to throw the ball and he has the players free and available, he can do a job. So it'd be interesting to see how he performs in this game, bearing in mind how productive he was only 10 days ago when they played in Atlanta.
Absolutely. We will be back to tomorrow night at 9 p.m. to preview all of Sunday's action. And once again, thanks to everyone who watched tonight. Thanks to those who listen to the podcast. Do give us a like, do subscribe, do leave a review if you are listening to the podcast. It does really make a difference helping people to find us. Thanks to our partners, Cassidy Travel, and Brian and I will look forward to chatting to everyone again tomorrow evening.
Thank you.